There was a bit of a sort of second honeymoon phase for Donald Trump early in the coronavirus pandemic, and we talked about it at the time. His approval rating on his handling of the coronavirus pandemic was actually not bad early on. His general presidential approval had actually ticked up in mid-March to close to 50%, which is very close to a high for Donald Trump's presidency. And this wasn't shocking. And as we talked about at the time, there's this historical a sort of rally around the president tendency during times of national crisis. We saw after 9/11, for example, George W. Bush's approval spiked dramatically to as high as 90%, which is it's almost unthinkable today. Of course, it was eventually squandered by George W. Bush, but then it spiked again as the Iraq War got going in early 2003, all the way up to 71% approval. And then again, that fell off for George W. Bush as that war ended up being a completely misguided disaster. And Donald Trump had a little bit of this in March. Back in March, his approval ticked up. But as his administration's response to the virus has tragically been one of the worst in the world. I mean, I'm not going to say the worst, but you have to look pretty hard for leaders who responded more poorly than Donald Trump did. We have seen Donald Trump experience the sharpest drop in approval of his presidency so far. Now, the news here for now is the rapid change so far. Okay. The absolute numbers are still in the normal range for Trump's presidency. His approval's down to 43. That's not the absolute low of his presidency. His disapproval spiked to 54. Again, that's not the high disapproval of his presidency. But if you're looking at the chart with me right now, you see that this is a very rapid 9 point jump in disapproval since the last time Gallup did the survey. And a 9 point jump in 3 weeks is the biggest, fastest jump in that time period during the presidency. Now, where will it go next? We don't know. But it's clear that Americans are on average, realizing the disaster that is Donald Trump handling a true crisis. Now, his supporters are still absolutely enamored with his handling. They now are increasingly protesting for the reopening of states, with Trump increasingly supporting them. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But at the national level, on average, Trump's approval has declined very quickly over the last 3 weeks. Now, in the meantime, the polling for Joe Biden in the 2020 presidential election, which is now just 6.5 months away, continues to be strong, but I'm going to keep being very careful about this. All that I'm telling you today is that right now, 6.5 months before the election, there's a trend in which Joe Biden isn't doing poorly against Donald Trump. The trend is that the country is, as I said already, it's on average a country that disapproves of Donald Trump and is a country that on average is leaning towards Joe Biden. But things can change quickly. And remember that we have an electoral college in the United States. So in the latest NBC News Wall Street Journal poll, Biden is +7 over Trump, 49 to 42. That still leaves a full 9% unsure or with third parties right now. We then have a Harvard Harris poll, which has Biden +6. And this one, it's Biden 53, Trump 47. That one has no undecideds. Now, this could mean nothing by November, and Trump may get himself reelected. And so we have to be very careful about inferring much at all from this. Interesting also, in North Carolina, Biden is now +1 in a recent poll. Trump had actually been winning in North Carolina in a bunch of recent polls. So that's a big flip. The caveat being, this is a PPP poll. PPP polls are known for leaning Democratic. It may mean very little, but if Biden can stay close in North Carolina, that's a state that Trump won by 3+ in 2016. If it's even, if Biden is really +1 in North Carolina, that could suggest a worse outcome for Trump in 2020 than he had in 2016. The important takeaways are, we're counting every vote. We're not opting out. I'm speaking of optimistically. None of us are opting out of the election. We're pushing for vote by mail and the expansion of absentee ballots so that we can keep people safe and voting in November. Nothing changes for us as a result of these numbers. We want no one to die or go without coronavirus care. You know, Republicans are now trying to give some oxygen to this theory that the left wants more people to die from the virus so that it will be bad for Donald Trump. Trump has already failed. No one else needs to die for Trump to deserve being removed in November. And I think that that's the important thing that we have to point out. Every time they say, you want a higher death toll, we say, that's absolutely ridiculous. There's no evidence of that. And it's not about a higher death toll to justify Trump's removal. Trump's rhetoric and actions to date already justify his removal. Even if the deaths went to zero today, it's a false premise. Don't let them trick you into these red herrings. But also, don't get lulled into any sense of complacency because of these numbers.